How is everybody doing today? In this video, we are going to talk about one of the modes that are currently inside Heaven Burns Red, and right now we actually have some missions to get some quartz out of completing certain floors within this mode, and this is going to be the Oubliette of Tears. Now, for those that don't know about the Oubliette of Tears, today's video is going to be not only how to clear from level 1 all the way to level 50. I'm going to give you some tips. I'm going to give you some general standards, I guess you could say, when building around your team, and also some overall general preferences in which teams you should bring to some of these floors. And not only that, I will be providing at the end of this video a map from floor 1 all the way to floor 50 on the entrance of each floor and the exit of each floor. That way you can speed run your way all the way from level 1 to level 50 to make it as easy as possible and use the least amount of life stones in terms of your runs. Now, of course, for those that don't know about the Oubliette of Tears, why is this any use besides the quartz that we get from the mission? If you don't know already, the Oubliette of Tears is actually going to give you the tiers for some of the memoria that you have in the game. So that means if you go to any of the memoria and you go all the way to the bottom for the tier enhancements, if you've seen this tab before, this is where you're going to be using all your tiers. Now, these tiers actually give a crap ton of stats to your memoria specifically that you are giving these tiers to. These don't carry on to any other character because they are all exclusive. But looking at this Ruka specifically, we're getting base stats like strength, like vitality, all these really good stats that are gonna allow them to either last longer or be able to do a little bit more damage. And every single time you upgrade 2 of these main base stats, you are also going to get an increased effect of whatever character you're doing. So if you're doing an attacker, then you're going to get increased skill damage, so that means they're going to hit a little bit harder after you get this passive unlocked. Same thing goes for either, let's say, a buffer or let's say a healer. When you look at someone like Psycha, you go to her tier enhancement, you can increase the attack raising skill effects. Or same thing goes for someone like Mua. Same thing goes. If you go to the bottom where the tier enhancements are, you can increase the healing effect of their healing moves. So there's a lot of really great stuff that come from these tiers specifically. So you are going to be grinding these out in the Oubliette of Tears. And this is where a majority of your life stones are going to go in the future when building out a bunch of memorias and you're already finished with the accessory grind that everyone is currently at the moment. So to talk about the Oubliette of Tears specifically, this mode is going to work the same way you do your usual dungeon. There's going to be mobs every single other chance that you're walking around each floor, and within these floors, not only are you going to find mobs, you want to go ahead and clear out as fast as possible so you can save as much energy as possible. There's going to be some mini bosses along the way, and then every 5 floors there's going to be a major boss. Now, one thing I do want to talk about before we get into the teams, before we get into some of the tips that I'm going to give you, I do want to make sure that everyone knows how the checkpoint system works, because it can end up being a problem. I ended up doing it, which is funny enough, so I want to be able to warn anybody else who's going into this for the first time. Every 5 floors, that is the end of that section, I guess you could say. Level 1 up until level 5. Level 5 will have the boss. Level 6 up to level 10. Level 10 will have the final boss. Now, although you beat the final boss, this doesn't mean that you unlocked the checkpoint already. You want to make sure that you beat the main boss, and every main boss is every 5 floors. Once you beat the 5th floor and that main boss, because there will be mini bosses along the way, the 5th level boss, or every 5th level boss, you want to go ahead and go into the room after it. Doesn't matter if you're out of energy, doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form. You have to make sure after you beat that final boss of the 5th floor, go into the next floor, because that will allow you to come back later on. Let's say you're on level 20 and you logged out before you went into 21. You're gonna go back to level 16 and you have to make your way back all the way to level 20 and then get into 21, and then that's where you'll have your checkpoint. So you want to make sure after you finish the main boss, please go into the next room so that you can peacefully leave that mode, or you can leave the game and you'll be back at 21 next time you start. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start with some of the tips and some of the preferred teams you want to go ahead and bring out during your dungeon grind for the Oubliette of Tears, and so that you can get the quartz associated with the missions as well. So we are going to talk about the general team power that I took on to get to floor 50 and beat the boss. You do want to have your team at around 15,000 power if you want to get to the final floor a little bit relatively with ease, because I felt like I didn't struggle that much within getting to the final floor. And it's because getting from floor 46 to floor 50 does take some time, because yes, you do want to save your exclusive skills for your final boss that you'll be fighting at level 50, just because it has a crap ton of health. But not only that, it is going to be hard to take out enemies when you're not using your exclusive skills and you're trying to save it for, of course, the mini boss that happen every so often, and of course the final boss as well. So my team was around 15,000 power by the time I cleared floor 50 with the final boss defeated. So that was a really good thing for me, and hopefully that is a little bit of a metric that you can use to see where you'll land in terms of beating floor 1 through 50. But now I'm going to talk about the other tips that I'm going to talk about in regards to the Oubliette of Tears. For the Oubliette of Tears specifically, the way I did it is I used a life stone, or the 2 life stones, or the 1 dungeon pass, whatever you're using. I used 1 set of them so that I could get to 10 floors each time. So I went through floor 1 through 10, and then got to 11, went through 11 through 20, got to 21. And I went that way. I wanted to do 10 levels every 2 pairs of life stones, and it should be relatively easy until you hit the farther floors. I think it starts ramping up in difficulty near level 30 up until level 50. That's when you can start seeing a notable increase in health of these enemies. I do feel like floor 1 through 20 is pretty easy if you're able to clear certain types of game modes inside Heaven Burns Red. This shouldn't be too hard for you, especially if you're matching weakness. If you're not matching weakness, as long as you're not resisted, you should be able to brute force your way through a lot of these enemies. But I feel like at level 30, you might have seen an increase in health to the point where you're like, okay, now I need to start using my exclusive skills. So the reason I reset every 10, or I leave the mode and then come back, is every 10 floors I want to be able to refresh my exclusive skills. That way I don't take too long in doing the Oubliette of Tears, because remember, the more energy that you're using between each turn, because the more turns you take, the more energy you waste, that means you either have to use a life stone to refresh, or you're gonna start losing health and eventually die if you take too many turns without energy. So what I do is I use those 10 floors and I start using my exclusive skills on the bosses themselves. That way I can nuke them down as fast as possible and try to get to the next floors as quickly as I can. So every 10 floors I leave the mode, I come back into the next segment of 10 floors, and I start using my exclusive skills. That way they can refresh by the time I leave on that 10th floor I'm finishing for that run or that day. And the next thing I want to say is please bring a lot of AoE, because remember, as I said, you will be fighting a bunch of mobs as you go through these floors, and it gets annoying when you have single target attackers as your main damage dealer and it's taking you forever to clear out those small enemies, and now you're wasting all your energy on these really small mob fights. You really want to make sure that you have a good amount of AoE within your team, whether it's part of your healer's kit like SS1 Aoi, SS1 Tama, or any of these other characters. A lot of the attackers do have AoE moves like the any Ruka with the exchange S Ruka from the event. We also have another character like Yuina as well, where she has her AoE. Wacky has her own AoE. A lot of attackers have their own AoE centered move, and then you also want AoE debuffers as well if possible. Now you do still want some type of single target damage as well for the 5th floor boss, and you are able to switch between memorias of characters, not different characters specifically. Like if you want to switch out Saika for someone like Yunya, no, you can switch out Saika SS2 for Saika SS1 if that's going to help you in any way, shape, or form for the actual characters that you need. So let's say you want to rock an AoE team, you have memorias that are more AoE centered, use that, and then you switch into the memoria of the same name that has more single target moves, or someone that's able to use single target boss killing moves, and that would be really cool as well. So you want to make sure you have a good bit of AoE and then one good source of single target damage for the final boss. That way you have a really good balance between the two so that you're able to complete it as easy as possible. And lastly, I do want to say, as I said before, I will be including a map for the entrance and the exit for the Oubliette of Tears for every floor from 1 to 50. That way it's easy for you to go ahead and speed run your way to level 50 so you can start your farming as soon as possible. I went ahead and skipped any rewards that aren't inside the main path of trying to get into the next floor. So for your first run, you want to make sure that if anything is on your way to leaving the floor, you can go ahead and pick that up if possible, but don't go out of your way your first run to go from picking up a couple tiers, picking up some of the gems that are on the floor, because it can waste you energy when you're fighting an extra mob fight. And of course, that's life stones you have to spend to be able to regain that so that you can actually keep going forward in the floors that you're currently grinding. So make sure, just use the maps I gave you. They're gonna have the entrance and the exit so that you're able to go as fast as possible through these floors. But let's go ahead and finally talk about which teams to bring every 10 floors. That way you have a general standpoint on what to bring, and then make it as easy as possible for you so that you're able to clear everything as fast as possible. And then you get the maps at the end, and that'll be the end of the video. So for floor 1 through floor 10, you want to bring a slash attacker, because most of these enemies, when it comes to the mini boss and the final bosses through 1 through 10, are going to be slash weakness. So this is going to allow you to do a lot of damage for your slash attackers that you have on the team. From floor 11 through 20, you want to bring a pierce attacker, because they are favored within the weakness, but you can bring slash as well, or crush, whatever is your preference, just because I do think floor 11 through 20 are still when they have very low HP, so you can brute force your way through it if possible. Floor 21 through 30, you want to bring pierce or crush, because crush is going to be favored, but pierce can work as well, with slash being resisted. 31 through 40, you want to go ahead and bring pierce or crush once more. Slash is resisted a lot on these floors, which is going to happen near the end of the run, where slash is just resisted for everything for some reason. Floor 40 through 450 is going to bring your strongest element team. All of the typings work, it's just no one has a certain weakness, or no one has a certain resistance to any of the bosses that you are going to be fighting. And then the last thing I want to say as well when we are in the floors is that floor 50 actually has 2 phases. So you want to make sure that you are prepared when you do take on the floor 50 boss, because not only do you have to fight the boss once, you have to fight them once more. And then not only that as well, you have to beat floor 46 up until 50. So that means not only do you have to clear the mob fights as well that are from 46 to 50, but you also have to fight a mini boss that is a duo boss. So you have to fight 2 different enemies that hurt quite a bit and put a crap ton of debuffs on you. And those are going to be characters you want to use exclusive skills on, because if you keep them up for long, they're going to do a lot of damage. But the problem with that as well is that you want to keep your exclusive skills for the final boss, because they do a lot of damage and they also have 2 different phases. So one thing I want to say before you take on that final boss at floor 50 is make sure you are making the necklaces, if I'm not wrong, that allow you certain elements to get an extra use of their exclusive skill, because that's going to help you out in taking out those mini bosses that are the duo bosses. And then not only that, that's going to allow you to go into the final boss with enough exclusive skills. That way you're actually able to go ahead and do the damage that you need versus that final boss, and that you can KO both sides of that, or both phases of that boss specifically. So other than that, that's pretty much it for the Oubliette of tiers. I've given you my general tips, I've given you the way I grinded it, and lastly, of course, I am going to give you the maps right now after this little portion of the video, where it has every entrance, every exit of each floor, and you just follow that from one to the other and go all the way low 50 and complete it the way I told you about some of the preferences of what you want to bring so that you're able to bring it. A lot of AoE, somebody that has single target, and then of course have enough sustain so that you're able to deal with some of these bosses that give a crap ton of debuffs. So other than that, that's gonna be it for this video. Enjoy the maps that I have at the end of this video. See y'all guys in the next one, and peace.